Shootas, Blood and Teeth. What is it? The game is a 2D run-and-gun platformer. It was developed and published by Rogueside. They've made such games as Hidden Through Time Pirate Treasures, and the Guns, Gore and Cannoli franchise 1 and 2. The game is essentially a Warhammer 40k version of that game. It's safe to say this game is probably comfortable ground for the developers. Guns, Gore and Cannoli was received very well, so taking everything they've learned from those games and applying it to this, I imagine must have felt very natural.
This planet is green!
The Warhammer 40k universe is a dark and miserable place where there's only war. Every faction is fighting for survival with their own goals and not enjoying themselves. However, have you ever wondered how the Orc race see the universe?
Here we go!
They see fighting as a pleasure. The bigger, harder, the stronger the enemy is, the happier the Orcs are. In Shootas, Blood and Teeth, you play as the Orcs. The Orcs are basically a type of mushroom that infests the universe. Their technology is based on a belief system, like painting yourself purple will make you invisible. I fucking hope this stuff comes off. If you're looking to delve into some Orc novels, you can't go wrong with anything to do with the War for Armageddon. I'm currently reading the Beast Arises series, which I'm really enjoying. Honestly, just knowing the basics about the Orcs will get you through this game perfectly fine. You don't need a degree in Orc anatomy. Now, without spoiling the game, because I get endless comments saying I do this even though I have a fucking spoiler section, the story takes place on Alpha in the Armageddon sector. Your boss, Ogruk Gutwrecker, wants to take the planet for its resources of Promethium. You play as a single orc called Gargaz Teeth Grabber, who was minding his own orky business. However, Mr. Gutwrecker notices something far more valuable than all the Promethium on this world: your hair squig. He decides it would be far more fabulous on him, so takes it off you and kicks you off his bomber. This is where the anime redemption arc kicks in, all like John Wick having his dog killed, but this time it's a squig, where you as Gargaz set off over the planet to seek revenge against your war boss. And that's the premise of the story with no spoilers. Absolutely glorious and very orky. The game does have an opening cutscene which is a delight to watch as it does set the scene. It doesn't bombard you with fluff about 40k or anything like that.
The Imperial Room is giving us a right fight!
Just the premise of the game's story as described, and honestly that's all that's needed. I think this is one of the first 40k games where someone can play it without any prior knowledge about the lore and still fully enjoy it. If I had a friend who's never played or heard of Warhammer 40k before, this would be my introduction game for them. Get ready because there's about to be spoilers in 3, 2, 1. The first thing Gargaz does when he gets pushed off the bomber is to find another Orc clan to take over. He beats the boss of Clan Goths whilst listening to some sick tunes that honestly you could start raving to whilst fighting. He claims the Orc clan is his own and persuades them to charge the Hive City with him to find a way back to Ogruk's ship in orbit. You and the other Orcs lead a trench charge over no man's land that would even make the Krieg look like children, with many of your fellow Orcs dying on the way. You eventually meet your first real threat being the Imperial Guard, and you piss them off enough to seek the wrath from the Bastion of Valor or And honestly, the writing is one of the best things about this game. They purposely over-exaggerate the movements with the dialogue, and I feel like I'm watching a pantomime sometimes. This Commissar's movement is almost puppet-like.
Vile Xenos! How dare you profane the sacred territory of the Imperium of Man!
Oh, never mind that, you me!
The dialogue is written in a way where it's self-aware of how over-the-top 40k is, and the developers get that. After you defeat the Sesame Street Commissar, you need to find a way into the Hive City, so you take the sewers. Of course, you run into a gene-stealer cult called the All-Seeing Emperor. After you cause enough chaos in the Underhives, you bring out the Patriarch, and as usual, Gargaz doesn't take any of this seriously and just reacts how you would expect an Orc would.
You's just funny-looking Yumis! What's you gonna do to a big Orc like me?
After defeating the Gene Stealers, you need to find a way to get higher, so like any good Orc, you blow your way up. You run into more Imperial Guard fighting Gene Stealers in hab zones, but you're still trying to get higher. You eventually reach the upper high, which has not gone unnoticed by the guard. This results in them calling in elite special reinforcements such as the Tempestus Scions, which is honestly so cool to see in a video game. I love that Rogue Side haven't been generic in their enemies and have gone for some more unusual ones. You eventually get to the Sanctum Administratum of Luteus Prime, where the officials have really had enough of you, so they request support from the White Scar Space Marine Legion to deal with you. And they definitely live up to their name being very fast, but can be killed. You finally work your way to the Hive City spaceport, where the Imperi Room start throwing everything at you. And by far, this is my favourite part of the game, where you face an Imperial Knight Valiant, and it just speaks for itself.
Attention, Orc! You face Lord Hoary Panorum, son of High King Varric Panorum, High Prince of House Panorum, Master of the Blade of Gaia, Keeper of the Gates of Arano, Wielder of the Caloric Flame, Bringer of Hope, Herald of the Holy Order of the Adamantine Lance, the Paladin of Koto, Slayer of the Lion of Essa, the Triumphant, the Light of Stars, the Eradicator!
The game perfectly takes the piss out of Warhammer while still showcasing it, and having an Orc be the point of view of the player just makes it so much better. I've got to say, the Knight is beautiful, such a glorious asset, and the attention to detail has been taken. Gargaz ends up stealing a White Scar's Thunderhawk, which is very fitting since it's partly painted red, and ends up crashing into his boss's ship for the final arc.
Uh-oh, that ain't good.
You go through Ogrut's ship, finding your way to the engine room to bring it down. This results in the ship crashing and a final showdown between you and your boss, who does not hold back with an Orc Stomper. I just love that this entire fight is purely based on a hair squig, and it perfectly demonstrates that if the Orcs did work together, they would be the biggest threat to the Imperium. However, they're having squabbles like this on a daily basis. You take down your boss's Stomper and become the leader of the clan. The end. The story was written by Baptiste Bout, the lead programmer, producer and creative director of the game, and the almighty GW writer Guy Haley, who I imagine ensured the IP would be represented correctly. I honestly love the story for its simplistic nature, and I would love to see Gargaz Teef Grabber's adventures continue with Eldar, Tau, Necrons. They could go in honestly any direction, but I do feel it should remain with Orcs at the focus because I don't think it would work as well, but that's just my opinion. The story is told through animated cutscenes which are great, but for some reason they seem to be slightly lower pixel quality than the rest of the game, but maybe that's just for consoles, I don't know. There is actually some prequel comics about Gargaz briefly showing what happened before the bomber. His squig actually kills a commissar.
A great slam and then some.
The gameplay of Shootas, Blood and Teef is something even your nan could understand. You start the level, follow the path, which usually involves either going left or right to left, kill any enemies you see, buy new weapons, hats.
I like your hat, by the way.
Fight the bosses and continue till the end of the game. It's a 2D run and gun, you ain't getting much more than that, but honestly that's fine. Shootas, Blood and Teef gameplay mechanics can be broken down into two areas, the combat and the shop. That's pretty much it. The game runs on your basic WASD controls, left click to shoot, sprint and then a double jump. The game doesn't force you into any playstyle. Most of the time you're just going to be jumping around up and over enemies to avoid their bullets. The game does offer a few different mechanics and levels. Sometimes you might have to dodge some environment effects, parkour your way over boxes, turn a lever to open a door or kill all enemies to proceed. The gravity might be affected changing how you fight. Lastly, there was one kind of defense part of a level that you don't really move much, which I would have liked to have seen more of. As much as I like the game being simple, I really feel like they could have expanded a bit more on level design. How about a level where there's a timer which you can die if you don't complete it fast enough? You could take a look at some of the older Mario games to get some ideas, like water rising that you need to avoid, or a platform that you have to remain on whilst fighting for a level. That could be an Orc truck. Or how about a level in darkness where you need a light source? Just something to mix up the levels a little bit more, but they're still really enjoyable. When you're fighting, you have 5 different weapons you can choose from. You start with one, but as you progress, you gain more. This includes categories such as pistol, shooter, shotgun, explosive, and special. It doesn't really have that name, but I'm just calling it that. In each of those categories, you then have 3 options, plus the starter weapons. You've actually got a nice assortment of weapons from plasma guns, bolt guns, death beams, zap stick, and even a squig launcher. They all have different stats, which makes them situational, but it really doesn't matter what setup you go with. I advise you switch them out as you play. They also have brilliant descriptions for the weapons. What is better than Daka? Daka that bursts into more Daka. In terms of abilities, you have only one, which is your This increases the fire rate of your weapon and also gives you unlimited ammo for a brief time. It's better on some weapons than others I've found. You then have 4 classes to choose from, which is Flash Gitz, Weird Boy, Beast Snagger and Storm Boy. You change this by going back to the main menu, and I do wish they gave you the option to change mid-game, but what the hell. The only things that change depending on your class is really your look, melee weapon and grenade. Some classes are definitely better than others. For example, the Flash Gitz just gets a shitty bomb, however the Beast Snagger you get a fucking squig, and for the Weird Boy you get a stun grenade. Same goes for the melee weapon. Flash Gitz just gets a chopper, but the Beast Snagger gets an explosive spear. One detail I do like with the Storm Boy though is you can set people on fire with your jump pack. Some classes are just far better than others. I think they could have expanded on the classes a bit more with maybe some unique weapons or abilities, like the Beast Snagger being able to call in a Smasher Squig for a few seconds as an ultimate, or how about the Weird Boy casting a powerful psychic ability, just something to distinguish them a bit more. You can also choose which clan you belong to. It doesn't change the gameplay in any way, but it's still a nice detail, and I would have liked Blood Axis to be here. I wanted to paint myself purple as well, but oh well. If they ever make a sequel, they could really expand on the classes a lot with Mech Boys, Mega Knobs, Commandos, Pain Boys, all being their own classes with abilities, but honestly for what the game is, you got a nice selection. You get a nice range of Warhammer enemies you face in combat for a 2D platformer, however the main things that set them apart are either health, damage and range. There are 1 or 2 enemies that are quite unique unlike the others, like the hybrid metamorphs that have some quick attacks, the Borgrins with their shields that you have to attack from a certain angle, Commissars with personal void shields that when they go down will retreat and wait for it to charge back. I would have liked to have seen a few more unique enemies with these sort of different fighting styles. I'm actually surprised they had ratlings, first time in a video game I think. In terms of AI, everything is running around, following you and trying to kill you, which I like to see. Some enemies will stay back and attack you from afar, whilst others will try to get in close. There isn't really any team fighting with the AI, like they use abilities on each other to inspire themselves, or like a psyker buffing someone. However, I do enjoy seeing other factions fighting each other. Boss battles are definitely the best part about the game in my opinion. They're big, they're flashy, and you fight a good amount of them. They all follow that normal 2D boss battle format using abilities one after another, with some stages thrown in. The last thing to really cover in gameplay mechanics is Teef. Teef are used as a currency in the workshop, and I believe this is canon for the Orks. You earn Teef by finding stashes hidden in random areas, and some are extremely hard to find. Teef can buy new weapons, but more importantly they can get those sweet, succulent hats. There's actually quite a few different hats to choose from, and some are unlocked in different ways, but they don't change the gameplay in any way, it's more for bling. My experience with the game has been fun. I started with the Beast Snagger Orc and realised why the fuck am I using a gun when my melee attack does way more damage. When it comes to balance, no weapons felt OP to me, but some are definitely better than others. I also kept switching out my weapons and class whilst playing, and I eventually found something I was happy with. I definitely did experience a few bugs whilst playing though. Sometimes my checkpoint wouldn't save and it kept restarting me further back than intended. I did have 1 or 2 crashes during the game as well, one particular bug with a gene stealer where it couldn't move or attack me. Other than that, the game was rather solid for myself, and I completed it in just about 4 hours. I'll talk about the multiplayer in a bit, but the game does have quite a few achievements, from winning the game on hard mode, buying every hat in the store, which I don't even think is possible due to there being a bug with the Teef currency. It does show on missions how many Teef you haven't collected, however I spent nearly 30 minutes on missions searching every angle and I still couldn't find missing Teef. There is actually a couple of Steam discussions talking about this, mentioning it might be a bug, and also with the new patches it's actually affecting people's progression. One achievement that I don't think anybody has yet is the What's This achievement, which is meant to be unlocking all the secrets in the game. I've tried my best to find these, but I've had no luck. And I really wanted Commissar Yarek's hat. If you're familiar with Warhammer 40k, it's usually very grim-dark and miserable. Take a look at Darktide, Hired Gun, Space Marine just for reference. People love Warhammer 40k in this art style, and they would hate to see it in any other. However, the Shootas, Blood and Teef developers have been rather clever about tackling this. The Orc race love fighting, and they would see the universe through rose-coloured glasses. Any other race in this game, it wouldn't work as well, but this fits perfectly for the Orcs. The bright colours, exaggerated details and cartoony look makes the game look wonderful. Everything in the game is hand-drawn in Photoshop by the developers, which is very impressive. Props to the art team for this, and it gives me that warm Cuphead vibe. For those who don't know, the art style is actually based on Belgian comics, for example that ginger kid Tintin's art style, which I fucking remember in my French class. But this really sets it apart from any other Warhammer game. For the environments themselves, they are lovely to look at, from the Orc ship, Hive City and even the battlefield. Detail is everywhere, and you'll recognise some interesting Warhammer pieces, like a statue of Commissar Yarek, guardsmen quarters, firing ranges, industrial cranes in the background. Inside Ork buildings you can see parts of stompers, Imperial defense bunkers inside the bureaucratic part of the Imperium. One detail I love though is the amount of skulls the developers use, from coffee dispensers, shower caps, it's brilliant. There's also one part of the game where you're in Ogrok's ship, and let's just say Ogrok is a very wealthy Ork. His little museum puts Trizen the Infinite to shame. From many different Xenos weapons to Custodes armor, he also has an Ork with a pearl earring, one of the many famous Ork artworks. By far the best thing though is the posters. The developers get the irony of 40k and reflect it in the posters very well. Like 5-minute daily rest allowance, excessive sitting will be punished, and I think my favourite is, you are impressive. For the effects, there's not too much to cover if I'm honest. You've got some ambient light, however there's no shadows for things moving, very cartoony blood effects, obviously a shit ton of bullet types, explosive and flamethrowers. I think the bosses show off the best effects in my opinion, from lasers and bolt guns. There's also some nice effects in the environments, from electricity wires being damaged, smoke, and of course the sprint and jump indicators. I also love that there's a commissar taking a shit at one part in the game. When it comes to the music in the game, it was created by
Dion van Heerden,
who made a very funny video detailing how he made it.
I retired to my study to peruse the document, and I have to say that I was immediately impressed by Rogueside's clearly defined vision and ambition for the game's soundtrack. Yes, of course. It suddenly all seemed so obvious.
He explains that they were going for a heavy metal focus with the game, mainly with drums and guitars. However, he needed to split the music up into 2 tracks, one for combat and one for exploring. Take a listen.
We have 2 tracks representing the 2 primary gameplay states of combat and exploration, and the engine is crossfading between them as the player enters and exits combat.
Dion then carries on to talk about how there's a soundtrack for each race and faction that you encounter, like Space Marines, Orks, and even bosses. A lot of the soundtracks do sound relatively similar, but for an orky shoot 'em up, it gives you the right mindset. There's also the main song of the game called Shootas, which is an Ork band based in the game. Need I say more?
Out in the warp, with nothing to do, not even a mutant to tear up the crew. Looking for somewhere to get composted, we need something to fight, like we need grub to drink. Looking for one with some humans to crush, to bring Armageddon and guide them to dust. Get them hard, get them low, give them plenty of Taka.
I hope no one at fucking work sees this, honestly. There's actually only 3 voice actors in the entire game, which I assume are for Gargaz, Ogrok, the odd guardsman here and there, and the boss fights. Guardsmen have little quotes here and there, but I think by far the bosses are the most impressive. I'm a little disappointed Gargaz wouldn't talk more whilst fighting or playing. Could have had some funny one-liners about the environment or the enemies he's fighting, just to add some more to the character. For sound effects, everything sounds like it's supposed to. There's sound for moving, jumping. Take a listen to some of the weapons. The game has extremely smooth animations for characters, from walking, sprinting, falling, jumping, shooting, being idle and reloading. They flow into each other nicely and it never feels like you're restricted whilst playing. For enemies they have flinching animations, body dismemberment and also being burnt alive. By far though, my favourite animation in the entire game is with the Primaris Invictor tactical warsuit. He literally poses to draw with his pistol in a showdown. He then does a little flick of the gun before putting it back. There isn't really too much more to talk about animation since it's a 2D game. However, the assets of of course are very similar to the rest of the art style with the environments. Everything looks really cute in the game, like commissars and squigs, and even though they are cartoony, there's loads of detail on them. For example, take the Ogrim with a commissar's voxcaster giving orders, Ogrok having a bullet earring, or how about the little ratling's hairy feet?
Ow!
They've not been lazy with the UI at all and have gone for an orky theme with scrap metal. I love the loading screen art as well, also the little squig running in the corner. In-game, the UI is very simplistic with your health, warg, grenades and ammo all visible. Boss health is clearly indicated, also potential damage from the environment. For settings, I find it funny they have an option to turn off blood and gore, as I thought they might have done a Total War Warhammer where they charge money for that option. You've got a nice selection of languages. I'm extremely happy they have a screen shake intensity because it can ruin gameplay sometimes. Plenty of audio options, full video settings with VSync and no capped frame rate. Lastly, fully rebindable keys for controller and keyboard. Thank Gork and Mork. I think the multiplayer is where this game really starts to shine. It does have remote play so your friend doesn't have to buy it, which is a plus, but it's a great laugh to fight with your friend against enemies and bosses. Oh, holy shit.
Fuck me, man.
Oh my god. However, there is team killing and I'm unsure if the game's difficulty goes up with players.
You what?
For those who don't know how I review Warhammer games, I look for three things. How well the game approaches a new player from a gameplay and lore side, genuinely how well the game is made, is it scummy at all with any shortcuts, and does it please Warhammer fans, and is it a good Warhammer game? The game is a brilliant introduction to Warhammer 40k, if not one of the best. It doesn't bombard you with the lore and keeps the premise simple. There's a brief tutorial, but if you can't master it, then you honestly shouldn't be playing video games. It's a great game to bring your friends into with remote play, and I highly recommend that. 10 out of 10. The game flows very smoothly and has a huge amount of passion put into it from the developers. It had a relatively smooth launch and is playable from start to finish. The game only has a 4-hour campaign, some bugs that aren't game breaking but frustrating due to being unable to complete some achievements, and some that are just annoying whilst playing. Lastly, quite a high price tag for a game with not a great deal of content. 6 out of 10. The game is very pleasing to Warhammer fans and it's a nice change from the other things we've played. There's key art paying respect to the lore, some interesting choice of enemies that usually wouldn't be even considered, and the game very much takes the piss out of Warhammer 40k in a brilliant fashion. One thing the game spoiled before it was even announced was the death of Commissar Yarrick, which I find absolutely hilarious, and it deserves a 10 out of 10 for that. I give Shootas, Blood and Teef a 7 out of 10. Have the developers put a shit ton of work in equal to that price? Yes. Is it worth that price? No. 4-hour story? I wouldn't say so. I recommend you wait to a sale or have one friend buy it and play remote. As for my next video, it will be a Darktide review, but I will probably have another smaller video talking about upcoming Warhammer games before then. Once that's finally done, we're going back to some old school Poncha with the unification mod, some speculation videos, and a few other things. Take care everyone.